Hello, sports fans, and welcome to Let Me Speak, the show that shares sports' biggest headlines explained, uninterrupted, and maybe a little audacious. I'm Joe Braverman, and today's topics we'll be discussing are breaking down how the Golden State Warriors became champions once again, plus Colorado or Tampa Bay, a preview of the Stanley Cup Final, and what to expect ahead of this week's U.S. Open. It's episode 76 of Let Me Speak, and it starts right now. We are back after a little bit of a hiatus. We're here on Friday, June 17th, 2022 for the 76th episode of Let Me Speak. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We did have an unexpected week off, just some scheduling conflicts going around there, but we are back, and normally we do this on a Thursday for all you regular listeners out there, but I postponed this a little bit to a Friday for a couple of reasons. One, the overnights over at WEI kind of got to me a little bit. And number two, I wanted game 6 of the NBA Finals to happen so we could have full discussion about it, because there was just some feeling I had after game 5 that I felt like game 6 was going to be the end and a champion would be crowned. And that is exactly what happened as the Golden State Warriors finished off the Boston Celtics in 6 games. Winning game 6 in Boston and capturing their 4th title in 8 years. And I think this one has to be one of the more improbable runs for Golden State. Not necessarily that everyone was writing them off as a championship team, but considering the past 3 years that have happened with injuries and then Durant leaving, and then having the worst record during the shortened season, or the pandemic season, I should say, and then not making the playoffs the year after. This was more improbable. And listening to the telecast and listening to Jeff Van Gundy on ESPN, he said that this was maybe the least talented team among this run for Golden State. And it's right and it's wrong of that. When you look at some of these title teams, look at 17 and 18, when you have the core 3, plus you got Durant, healthy Iguodala, and all these kind of weapons. It makes sense, but this is still a very talented Golden State team. And how they won it, everyone's looking at how strong of an offense they are, how well they came together, but I really want to point out something that Draymond Green said in his post game, and that was their defense. I thought their defense was very, very underrated, and it makes sense when you have such a flashy offense, when you got guys making shots. But the way they were able to basically just suffocate the Celtics, and the way the Celtics just looked so pedestrian out there. Part of it was just Golden State was just hammering them down, whenever the Celtics were driving into the lane, they had 2 or 3 bodies out there, was making it really difficult for those driving kicks for the Celtics to make that happen. So that's an underrated thing. But of course, everyone's got to turn to the offense. The way they were just able to make shots, Steph Curry putting the team on his back. And then, this is sort of a Golden State team. Steve Kerr has sort of shaped this team as this is a team that's not going to lose the series right away. It's going to be a sort of grinded out series. And the conditioning of Golden State, I thought, was absolutely huge. When you go to game 4, game 5, game 6, you saw Steph Curry still running around out there. Meanwhile, the Celtics were all stagnant out on offense. So I think credit to the coaching staff for Golden State. I thought the defense was extremely important for Golden State, the way they were able to suffocate and force turnover after turnover after turnover, and then getting on the fast break off of those turnovers ginormous, absolutely ginormous, especially for a young team like the Celtics who have never been in this position before. And you've got a Golden State team that's been to the finals 6 times now and have won 4 of them. So experience versus inexperience, there's a lot of factors you can pick out from then and there. But ultimately, I said it on our last episode, is that Golden State is basically the 21st century Chicago Bulls. Not necessarily that they're in the same category or you're putting, Michael Jordan and Steph Curry on the same level. Not at all. Not at all. I'm just talking for the 21st century. There has been this is the NBA's Chicago Bulls of the 90s, in that they just get to the finals, and whenever you think you got them down, they just come right back up. And the path is somewhat similar. I mean, you look at the Bulls in the 90s, they got those 3 titles. Jordan leaves. They don't win for a little bit, and then they win 3 more. This is kind of on a similar path. You had Golden State, who won 3 of the previous 4, starting from 14-15. Obviously there was that big 16 finals by Cleveland. Take that out of there. But then they have this period of, they're not winning. Maybe it's over. But then reemergence, in this case, Steph Curry. Back in the 90s, it was Jordan, and they win more titles. So that's sort of the parallels I'm making out of this for the Golden State Warriors. And I think, everyone wants to talk about now, like, all-time ranks, where everyone ranks. I think Steve Kerr is a top 5 coach of all time. Just trying to name some off the top of my head, Phil Jackson, Pat Riley, Red Auerbach, just to name a few. He's definitely got himself in that top 5, of coaches of all time. I think Steph Curry is now locked and loaded in top 10. I know everyone wants to talk about, is he the greatest now? I don't really put him in the top 5. I think he's more like a 6, 7, something like that. He's definitely top 10, because I mean, having the finals MVP puts, the nail in the coffin of, like, his all-time greatness. First ballot Hall of Famer. I think Klay Thompson's a Hall of Famer. Draymond's a little bit, he could be on, like, the edge, but I would sort of lean towards Hall of Famer there as well. But, considering where this team was to where they are now, as I said before, it's not the most talented team, but when you have guys like Gary Payton II contributing, Nemanja Bjelica came in now and again. Kevon Looney was huge in this series. I think he had a 20 rebound game. I don't know if it was last night, but it was somewhere in this finals. He had that in there. Trying to remember, Jordan Poole, obviously getting involved now with the Splash Brothers. Otto Porter making that rotation change. Now he was in the starting lineup. I thought Golden State did a great job, and they just showed, they had more depth. They didn't have they had more championship experience, but that's just because of their core. Everyone else had no experience at all in these big moments. And with the leadership of that big 3 with Green, Thompson, and Curry, it propelled them. It propelled them to a finals win. And obviously, I mentioned Steph Curry being the finals MVP. You could see it from game 1. Game 1, when he made 6 threes in the first quarter, you knew that he was going to be this finals MVP, and he was going to shine. Just pulling up the numbers real quick, 31 points per game in this finals, 42% from 3, 48% from the field. It only made sense that if the Warriors were to win, that they were going to win this. As for the Celtics side of things, we'll talk about their future, but just looking at the way they played, more particular these last 3 games, you look at the fourth quarter in game 4, overall game 5, overall game 6, there was something mentally off. I'm not saying that, this team didn't give their effort at all, because I think they maximized what they could. I mean, they had their chances. They had the lead in the fourth in game 4. They came back and took the lead in game 5. And they started out 14-2 in game 6 last night. But just to see the way the team kind of, not folded under pressure, but this was just a team that I don't think was ready for the big moment. You had a team with zero finals experiences. And, it looked good through the first three games. But then when it came down to the grit and grind part of the finals, the game fours, the game fives, the game six, where you had to have it. I think everyone, and I include the coaching staff, I include first year head coach Ime Udoka. He made some errors, specifically in game five, riding Tatum, Brown, and Horford so much. And then in game six, just some lineup changes. Just they did not look solid. Not saying that, this is a team that didn't deserve to be in the finals. They absolutely did. But I just think there was some kind of like mental fatigue in there, and they just look kind of worn out by Golden State. The minute they get on a roll, here comes Golden State making three after three after three, and it wearing out. Not the Celtics aren't the first team to have been worn out by the Golden State Warriors in the way they play. The fact that they continue to play for a full 48 minutes, the Celtics just had those lapses where Golden State just punched them in the throat and they didn't have a counter. They did not have a counter at all. I mean, 21-0 a run, getting it to a 20-point lead at one point in that third quarter. I look more at the Golden State side of things than the Boston side of things. Obviously, it's a sad day here in the state of Massachusetts in the Swampscott area and Boston in general. But there's a lot of shoulda, woulda, couldas for the Celtics team, but you could say that about every finals matchup. Who knows if they come back this year? Obviously, we'll dive in more to the future in Let's Get Local. But, the Warriors shut down Tatum. They shut down Smart. They shut down Robert Williams from time and again. And the Celtics just didn't have a bench. They did not have a bench at all compared to Golden State. You had your starting five, and then no one else could contribute. Meanwhile, for Golden State, you can plug and play a bunch of different options out there. So, as I said, we'll get into the Celtics side of things, but obviously the Celtics had their chances, and they couldn't capitalize on this finals. And I know everyone around this area was looking for an NBA championship, but just to see the energy in Boston and in the TD Garden for the first finals in 12 years is kind of surreal. I didn't go to a game, but just watching and listening to it on TV was tremendous. But I give full credit to the Golden State Warriors for winning their fourth championship in 8 years and continuing the modern day dynasty in the NBA. Now, when one championship ends, another begins, or in this case, I guess, continues. As we talk now about the Stanley Cup Finals, we are finally down to the two teams. It's the Colorado Avalanche and the Tampa Bay Lightning. And honestly, if you ask me at the beginning of the postseason, what was one of the likelier matchups for the Stanley Cup, I probably would have said this would have been in the top three of most likely matchups for the Stanley Cup. Because, I mean, obviously you got the Tampa Bay Lightning looking for the three-peat. Hasn't been done since the Islanders in the 80s. And then you got the Avalanche, who have just been basically from puck drop of opening night has just been rolling on fire. I'm really looking forward to the Stanley Cup. And if game one is any indication of what this series is going to be like, we are in for a very exciting matchup with the Stanley Cup. I mean, game one going to overtime, Colorado coming out with it in overtime, 4-3, leading the series one game to none, excuse me. And everyone wants to talk about, game one overreactions. Is Colorado going to end the three-peat chance? I want to talk more in specific what I'm looking forward to, before game one. I'm taking game one out of the equation, and these are sort of my expectations that I'm sort of looking at heading into the Stanley Cup. When I look at Tampa Bay's side of things, I see their championship DNA shining bright. You could look back on all their series, coming back against Toronto, sweeping Carolina, and then knocking out the New York Rangers. Um, I think their goaltender, I think the goaltender matchup in my eyes favors Andrei Vasilevsky. I think if you need a guy in net when it gets to those sort of gritty sort of games where you get to like game 4, game 5, game 6, I think Andrei Vasilevsky is the guy that I want to have in the net as compared to Darcy Kemper for the Colorado Avalanche. You know, we've seen it over time that he gets better as the series goes on. I mean, look at all the way to game 1 of the postseason. It was a 5-0 loss to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And what happens? They come back in that series, they win, and then they eventually find their way in the Stanley Cup. He looked great in the Rangers series, especially in those clinching games against the New York Rangers. I think this is a totally different animal, obviously, in Colorado, considering their offense and just what they provide scoring wise. But I still have confidence that Vasilevsky can, in the most part, shut down this Colorado team. Not saying he's totally going to shut them down, but, you know, it's kind of like a contained process, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. And then you just got a bunch of great weapons out there in Stamkos, Hedman, Kucherov. You know, they've got all these guys. What I see, though, what I think is going to make the difference is the defense at the blue line. Because, you know, I said it last series that Colorado was in against Edmonton, is that there's no game-changing defenseman that Edmonton had, and there's no game-changing defenseman that Tampa Bay had, really, that can make a difference. So I really look at the blue line and how important that's going to be for Tampa in this. You know, I see guys like Victor Hedman, as I mentioned. I see Ryan McDonough, you know, just looking at the lineup real quick. Sergachev, Cernak, just to name a few. I think if they can go toe-to-toe scoring-wise with Makar, with Kale Makar for Colorado, Byram, Johnson, Manson, Tays, I think that's going to be huge for Tampa. It's going to be huge. But just Colorado, man, it is hard to go against that team, what they've done, you know, making easy work of the Oilers, I should say. You know, you'd think there would be rust in game 1, but no, the rust would be getting to overtime. I mean, they're 13-2 in the postseason, and one of those losses was in overtime. I think Colorado themselves are going to make it a high scoring matchup. This is a team that scores over 4.5 goals per game in the postseason, as compared to Tampa. Tampa's a good offense, and they score 3 per game. Colorado scores 4.5 goals per game. It's unreal, and just the speed that they have. I think what's so important for this series and for Colorado is getting off to a hot start. I mean, when you look at that game 1, they started 3-1, and then it was that second period where Tampa really shined and got the game tied at 3-3. So I think they're going to use their speed, and they're going to try and come out hot in the first half. And first half, I mean like 30 minutes, you know, the whole first period and half of the second period. I think it's sustaining that energy throughout the entire game is going to be absolutely huge. You don't want to let Tampa Bay in the game. You don't want to give them any signs of life, because they're basically like sharks. When they see blood in the water, they're going to go after the kill. And that's what I think Colorado has to be careful of. If they're going to start fast and they're going to build a lead, you got to have a huge lead. And I'm talking like a 3-goal lead by the end of 2 periods. That's what I see for Colorado's side of things on the scoring end, because we know who's going to step up, who's the main guys. We know it's going to be McKinnon. It's going to be Landeskog, Lehkonen, Rantanen. It's going to be all these guys, Makar, as I mentioned. So we know what the scoring is going to be like. And there's no doubt in my mind that Tampa is going to have a hard time stopping it. It's going to have a hard time stopping all that Colorado has. And then obviously in the defensive end, as I mentioned, Makar, I think he's got to have his fingerprints on every scoring play, because I think he's probably the best defenseman in the Stanley Cup out of both teams. I think Makar has to be huge in this series and provide that support to Mikko Rantanen and Nathan McKinnon and all those guys. On the goalie side of things, as I mentioned for Darcy Kemper, he is dealing with injuries. He's playing hurt, but he's had plenty of time to heal, and I don't think we're going to see him be hurt at all. It's not going to be that big of a factor at all. So if you're asking me, with everything I've looked at before game one, I would pick Colorado in this series, and I would pick them to do it. This might be surprising. I think they're going to do it in 5 games. I think they're going to win in 5. I just think they've got too much firepower. Not saying Tampa has no firepower, because they've got just as many weapons, but I just don't think they have the speed and the scoring ability that Colorado has been able to produce pretty much all season long. Basically, they started at the top, they've stayed at the top, and I think they're going to finish that way at the top. So I'm going to pick the Colorado Avalanche to win the Stanley Cup in 5 games. Okay, mark that down for everyone listening. Avalanche, 5 games, Stanley Cup champions. But regardless, you've got a ton of experience with the Lightning. You've got a high-powered scoring team in the Avalanche. This is going to be a fun Stanley Cup to watch. Now, there's a ton of stuff we didn't get to last week, but we still got a ton of headlines to watch for. So let's dive into this week's edition of Quick Hits. And obviously, the big story is the U.S. Open taking place right now in Brookline, Mass, at the Country Club. So far, it's been kind of surprising. I mean, the pre-tournament chatter was obviously the LIV players versus the PGA. That's been sort of overshadowing it, which I don't really like. I don't really like, this sort of, it can be an internal feud, but I don't like it, taking precedent over the tour or the major itself, because this is very pristine. It's a very pristine tournament. And, the story for this afternoon is Phil Mickelson missing the cut. And I don't know, just watching media and just watching how he conducted himself, he didn't look like the same lighthearted Phil Mickelson that we've gotten to know. Obviously he missed the cut, and obviously it's because, taking the LIV tour and all of that, but it's just, hey, the almighty dollar is so strong for guys like DeChambeau and Dustin Johnson and Patrick Reed and all these guys. But about the tournament itself, so far, just looking at the standings, we got David Lingmerth and Colin Morikawa leading right now at 5 under. You've got Brian Harman, Aaron Wise, and Joel Dahman at 4 under. And then you've got Nick Hardy, Scotty Scheffler, and Callum Tarren at 3 under. Now, before the tournament started, I had a feeling that, Rory McIlroy was going to play really well, but he's 2 over on the day. He was one of those players at 3 under after day 1, but just listening to him after the RBC Canadian Open, kind of basically being the soldier for the PGA, being the leader against the LIV, I thought he would have had a strong tournament. Now there's still some time. There's still some time for McIlroy to come back. I mean, he's at 1 under and he's only 4 back of the lead. Once you get to the weekend, anything can happen. But that would be my overall prediction. I stuck with it before the tournament began, and I'll stay with it even if I gotta fall on my own sword. But I think, for the US Open, let's focus more on the play at golf. Let's focus on the tournament rather than looking at the feud between the PGA Tour and LIV Golf. In the NFL, we had another player get paid, and that player is Minkah Fitzpatrick from the Pittsburgh Steelers. He is now the highest paid safety in NFL history, signing a 4-year, $74 million extension with a signing bonus of $36 million. That means he's getting $36 million guaranteed. Now, Minkah Fitzpatrick is not the standout safety. I don't really think there's any sort of standout safeties now in today's game. Not like an Ed Reed or a Rodney Barber or anything like that. I don't think that's going to happen. But when you look at the Pittsburgh Steelers and the history of strong defensive teams, you need a guy and you need two guys. Obviously, you have TJ Watt on the defensive line. But if you got Minka Fitzpatrick in that safety, I don't think the Steelers team would be there where they were the past couple of seasons, if not for Fitzpatrick at the safety position. So props to him for getting paid. Not saying this is going to be it's going to make a difference for where the Steelers are going to go, because I still think they're going to finish either last or second to last in that division behind the Ravens and the Bengals. But, hey, might as well have some insurance. If you can't have Troy Polamalu, you might as well have Minka Fitzpatrick. Sticking with football, though, we had mandatory mini camps go on, and then we'll get training camp going on. But I want to focus on Lamar Jackson. He's entering Ravens camp with no new deal and his rookie deal set to expire after this season. Now, everyone wants to talk about, is he going to stick around? Is he going to stick around? The talent that he has when he's healthy is top 10. The problem that he has is he hasn't gotten over the playoff hump. And I don't know if that's what the Ravens organization is looking at right now, saying, Lamar Jackson hasn't gotten us to a Super Bowl yet, but he's already been an MVP. Okay, you got to keep in mind, this is his fourth year starting for the Baltimore Ravens. So let's just pump the brakes on that just a little bit. He's still young. He's still on a rookie deal. And I think he'll get a deal done. But, when you look at the deals that recent quarterbacks have made, Deshaun Watson, who's going to be suspended for a year, is making $230 million. Derek Carr's in the top 5, I think, for highest paid quarterbacks. Matt Stafford's highest paid. I think Lamar Jackson, he doesn't have an agent, so he kind of looks at himself and saying, you know what, I'm better than these guys. I've played better over the past year. How come I don't get that kind of money? So I think that's sort of the leverage that he's looking at. I don't see Lamar leaving the Ravens anytime soon unless something dramatic happens, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on with Lamar Jackson still on his rookie contract. The story in baseball has been managers getting fired. So far, we've seen Joe Girardi get kicked to the curb and Joe Maddon shown the door for the Phillies and the Angels, respectively. And the next guy coming up might be Tony La Russa. I mean, let's just talk about what on earth the Hall of Fame manager was thinking. Walking Trey Turner with a 1-2 count, wanting to face Max Muncy, and letting a 3-run home run beat the Chicago White Sox. I mean, I'm not saying firing him is immediate, because obviously the situations are different. You have Joe Maddon, who managed an Angels team that still hasn't gotten to the playoffs with Shohei Ohtani and Mike Trout. Joe Girardi, who was on the brink of the playoffs for the Phillies, and then for about 2 weeks or so started tumbling, and he was shown the door, even though the Phillies are starting to play a little bit better. This is a White Sox team that's won the Central Division 2 years in a row. Excuse me. They won the Central Division 2 years in a row. They haven't gotten to the ALCS, though, as they've been knocked off by the Astros, I think it was, for the past 2 seasons. So I think after this season, it might be a look in the mirror. I think he's going to look in the mirror, the White Sox that are, and say, you know what, he's 77 years old. He's not going to be doing this forever, and we still haven't gotten over the hump. If we can't win this division, this might not be the right guy for the job. So I think all eyes are going to be on the south side of Chicago and that White Sox team. If they don't turn things around, they might say so long and fire a Hall of Fame manager in Tony La Russa. And finally, back to the NHL. Off the ice, there's a new head coach for the Vegas Golden Knights, and that is Bruce Cassidy. Now, I knew he wasn't going to be jobless for too long after the Bruins fired him. Do I think it was the smart job for Boston to fire him? 50-50. We'll get into that in our next segment, but I think the Golden Knights have a great hire here. You've got a great head coach who's taken the Bruins to the postseason in all 6 of his seasons. Ultimately, they got him to get to the Stanley Cup. They haven't gotten to the Stanley Cup since their inaugural season. They've gotten to the conference finals. This was the first year that they missed the playoffs. So all they're looking for is just a guy to get them back into the playoffs and get into the Stanley Cup. And I think it's a great hire to get Bruce Cassidy to lead the charge, because we know the Knights have the talent. The Golden Knights have the talent. Do they have the leadership? We'll have to see in the upcoming season. But Bruce Cassidy is one of the top coaches in hockey. I think it's a great hire by Vegas to get him to lead the way. And that is a wrap up of this week's edition of Quick Hits. As we always do, let's stay in the state of Massachusetts with our Let's Get Local segment of the week. And the talk of the town of the last 24 hours has been the Boston Celtics losing the NBA Finals in 6 games. They unfortunately had to see the Golden State Warriors celebrate on their home floor, only the second time in franchise history, which really surprised me that not many teams have been able to celebrate on the road in Boston. But hey, the energy was electric, as I said previously. First NBA Finals since 2010. The energy just all around Boston and in the TD Garden just looked electric. And obviously, this team couldn't make it happen at home for some weird reason. I don't know why, but they didn't have what it took this postseason to have a strong performance. This TD Garden is one of the more feared places at home to play if you're an opposing team. But you had guys coming in with no fear at all, and they were able to knock off the Celtics a couple of times. And by that, I mean Milwaukee did it, Miami did it, and now Golden State did it. But I talked about what they did wrong. I want to talk in this segment particularly about the future of the team, because I worked over at WEI after Game 6, and everyone, I'd probably say about 70% of the calls that I got were saying, you know what, it's time to trade Jason Tatum. It's time to trade Marcus Smart. Okay, to everyone thinking that, I'll just say, time out. Let's look at where this team was at the beginning of the season, at the beginning of the 21-22 season. This was a team that I personally pegged as realistic expectations being the 4th or the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference, the 4, 5, 6. That range was what I was targeting. They did worse than that. They were 18-21. And then look at them in 2022. They lost 3 straight games. That's the first time with consecutive losses since March. Okay? This team is good, okay? The foundation that this team has is good, with Ime Udoka at the helm. The core of Tatum, Brown, Smart, Robert Williams. That's what this team is going to lean on. They're going to lean on their defense, okay? They just ran into a buzzsaw of a team that wanted to get back to the top and get back to championship aspirations in the Golden State Warriors. The Celtics team has never done that before. No one had made the NBA Finals. Not one person on that roster, not one person has been to an NBA Finals. This was the first time. Let's look at the positive side of things, okay? It's a learning aspect, okay? Jason Tatum now knows what he has to do to elevate his game. Marcus Smart knows what he has to do to be a leader in these kinds of moments. Jaylen Brown knows what he has to do to carry the team on his back. Okay, let's pause in blowing the whole thing up. All right, let's pause on that. All right, that's the overarching thing that I'm going to say for the Celtics team. But the things that I think they have to work on, obviously, is ball control. I mean, the numbers were I think they had almost 16 turnovers so far per game in this finals. They had, I think, 22 last night against Golden State. And Jason Tatum had the most turnovers in a single postseason in NBA history with over 100, I believe. I believe it was 100 that he had. Obviously, ball control is going to be absolutely huge, as I just recently mentioned. Taking care of the turnovers. And the record, I think, was 1-13, I want to say. I think it was 1-13, 1-14 when they have 16 or more turnovers in this postseason. They have an incredible record when they're less than that. Okay, so overall, I just think it's a mental side of things. It's a young team who's got to learn the mental aspect. I mean, you had your most seasoned player was Al Horford, who's never been to a finals, and he's 36 years old. Okay, but on the mental side of things, they've got to learn to play. Okay, and when I mean that, I mean don't get hung up on the previous possession. And by that, I mean, if you're complaining to the refs, stop. If you get one bad offensive possession, move on, okay? Because pretty much this series, they got into their own head. You know, they got away from their play style. They got away sort of from their defense. You know, there was a lot of miscommunication in that game 6 where, you know, you saw Golden State basically have their way into the lane on fast breaks. Draymond Green was easily getting to the basket. He had a bunch of corner threes, which I know he didn't make all the time, but still leaving guys wide open just like that. They just look drained, and mentally they've got to fix sort of these dog days of the NBA playoffs. And on offense, you know, one play at a time and not getting hung up on any sort of previous possession. That's what I see for the Celtics team overall. I think what they have to fix as a team, you know, when I look at the offseason, they got to get more scoring depth. Okay. They need scoring off of the bench. And obviously, everyone on that bench disappeared. Grant Williams couldn't shoot. Peyton Pritchard couldn't make a shot. Derek White was scared to shoot. That's sort of what I see. Daniel Tice didn't even play, and he's your backup center, supposedly your backup center. So I think there needs to be some scoring depth off the bench. Well, I'll just say that they need depth in general off the bench. They need depth. And considering where the contracts are, they're definitely going to be paying luxury tax, considering, you know, they've got a lot of money attributed to Tatum, Brown, Smart, Horford, and Robert Williams. But it's probably going to have to be, you're going to have to get like some mid-level exception deals, some veterans minimum deals. And I think you got to find some scoring depth, and you got to find size, because Golden State abused you on the rebounds, especially on offensive rebounds. So I look at sort of some free agents who are very strong in the rebounding department, maybe on the power forward, the center side of things. You know, just first name that pops to my mind. Not saying they're going to get him is JaVale McGee. He's got the size and he's got the length to be a good rebounder and to be a rim protector. You know, you could get him in there. You know, maybe you bring back Jeff Green for some scoring depth on a 1-year deal. But scoring and bench depth, scoring and rebounding depth, I think is huge for the Celtics to try and get better. Now, do they get that in the draft? We don't know. Do they get it in free agency? We're not sure, because really they only got like 3 free agents, I think. Luke Cornett is the only unrestricted free agent. And then you've got, I think, like Broderick Thomas and Matt Ryan, who are restricted free agents, but you can easily let them go. Now, to talk about the more important players on this team, and by that, I mean the foundation, the core of this team. Everyone's been talking about Jason Tatum and basically his disappearance in the NBA Finals. Okay, in the finals, I got the numbers right up here. He averaged 21.5 points per game, 36% shooting, 6.8 rebounds per game, and 7 assists per game. And as I mentioned, he had the 100 total turnovers. But it was the second half of this game that really opened eyes for a lot of people. I mean, he only scored 2 points in the second half. In a must-win, do-or-die game 6, he scored 2 points in the second half, and he finished with 13 points and 5 turnovers overall in a must-win game 6. This is the superstar. This is the first team All-NBA. This is a guy who you're going to say, this is your number one scoring option. I'm not saying he can't change things because he's still young. He's still 24 years old, and he's been put in a lot of pressure situations pretty much since the start of his NBA career. Remember, in his rookie year, he went to a game 7 with LeBron James. Okay. There was still a learning process for Jason Tatum. And I think he's got to learn, what he's got to learn about that championship mentality. Let's just put that out there. Okay. And I agree. I was listening to the Greg Hill Morning Show on my way home from work, and I agree with Jermaine Wiggins, is that this is still a young guy. You can't give up on him just yet. I think you're going to look at this year and then maybe the year after that. Let's not form conclusions after his first NBA Finals in his 5th NBA season. Let's not form conclusions in that way. So that's sort of what I see with Jason Tatum. I think we're going to be talking about it a lot during the summer for the Celtics, is what is Jason Tatum going to do? Because you got a lot of people saying that, they would pick Jaylen Brown now to lead this team because he's got the leadership qualities. Plus, he was the only one that came out to play. It looked like in game 6, he put up, I think, 34 points. He was overall your leading scorer in the finals, 23.5 points per game, 43% from the field, 7 rebounds. But obviously his ball control was just as bad as Tatum's with 20 total turnovers in this finals. He's just got to learn to carry that play into the 4th quarter. He had a great 3rd, but getting into the 4th, how does he sustain that? I think that's going to be absolutely huge. I think Marcus Smart has got to learn more about he's a great voice off the court, but on the court, being the point guard, being that leader, I think he's got to, he's got to improve on that. But again, this was a team that was 18-21 heading into 2022. This was a team that was 3 games under 500, and here they are as the Eastern Conference champions in the NBA Finals. Let's calm down, okay? And the last thing I'll say, Robert Williams, when he's healthy, and I think he probably was getting healthier and healthier as the season went on, this dude is going to be a top 5 center by this time next year. Not if he already is. He is a top 5 center. The rim protector, the way he went out on the perimeter, blocking shots from Curry, from Poole, from Thompson, and then just being an overall rim protector and a presence inside. I would love to see him more involved on offense, being down the road. And part of that goes back to Smart, Brown, and Tatum finding him down low. I could have thought of maybe 2 or 3 different times he was wide open under the basket during game 6. So that's overall what I'm seeing for the Celtics team. And again, this is less than 24 hours removed from being eliminated from the NBA Finals. I don't think we can make conclusions less than 24 hours about what this team has to be and what they need to fix. Okay. We can discuss it, but saying that you need to get rid of, or not get rid of Tatum, but overall saying that he doesn't have that championship mentality and saying that Marcus Smart isn't your point guard, I think is ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. And if you're a Celtics fan thinking of that, shame on you. But for next season, I mean, you've got pretty much your whole core coming back. You still got Derek White under contract. You still got Grant Williams. You still got Peyton Pritchard. I think everyone's going to learn from this. And especially, considering Al Horford. Remember that. I mean, before I get off the Celtics, props to Al Horford. Okay. 36 years old, first NBA Finals. He's playing almost 40 minutes a game. He's guarding Stephen Curry pretty much like his life depends on it. Okay. I don't think anyone, I just look at that 3rd quarter. He was getting switched on the perimeter guarding Steph Curry, and he wasn't getting any help defense. But I would still take Al Horford in a foxhole at all. I know his contract is coming up to an end after next season, but I would love to see Horford finish his career with the Boston Celtics. Maybe he takes a pay cut to stay with the Celtics, because we've heard it, all throughout this finals. He loves being in Boston. He's got such an appreciation for the Celtics fans. Maybe he doesn't maybe he's not your starting power forward for the rest of his time, but, maybe he's a six man if you get, a stronger power forward or someone like that. But I would love to see Al Horford remain with the Boston Celtics for the rest of his career. But that's just overall the knee-jerk reaction for the Celtics. Let's get to a more positive aspect side of things, and that's the Red Sox. I mean, we now got to start paying attention to them because they're the only team playing right now in the Massachusetts, New England area, and they have been playing very well recently. 8-2 during their West Coast swing. They've won 11 of their last 14 games, and I circle back to starting pitching. I mean, even with their recent injuries, with Nathan Eovaldi going on the IL, Garrett Whitlock going on the IL, look at what they're getting from starting pitching. Nick Pivetta has been amazing. Cutter Crawford and Josh Winkowski, who are AAA call-ups, were throwing shutout baseball, okay? Cutter Crawford in Seattle throwing 5 one-hit innings on a bullpen day. Josh Winkowski coming out and throwing 5 solid innings. I mean, this winning streak is on the foundation of their starting pitching. And I think when you have guys like Eovaldi and Whitlock coming back, and then even Chris Sale, we'll talk about Chris Sale probably in the future. But when you've got those guys coming back and bolstering your rotation and the bullpen, I think that's huge. And I think Alex Cora is starting to find his dependent relievers coming out of the bullpen. John Schreiber has pitched great. Tanner Houck in closing situations has been great. And even Austin Davis from time and again. It's still not the strongest part, and there's still, a lot of question marks for that bullpen. But with Alex Cora figuring out, who are the guys? Who are these guys? He's done a tremendous job with that. And to see the way the Sox have turned things around, and it's not even the All-Star break. They've salvaged their season, like I've said. They salvaged their season from what it was going to be. And I think you have to look at starting pitching as a big fuel in that. I think the other factor has been Rafael Devers playing at an MVP level. I mean, the dude homered in like 4 straight games or something like that. And then top that off with Bogart still hitting well, Martinez still hitting well, and then even Rob Refsnyder being a spark plug while Kike Hernandez is still in the IL. I think lineup-wise, you still need production from 1 through 9. Not saying everyone needs to hit a home run, but you need Bobby Dahlbeck still hitting. You need Christian Vasquez getting on base. You need Trevor Story to learn to hit the ball, for goodness sake. And I think he's going to learn to hit the ball during his summer months. I think he's much better in the summer months, in the dog days of summer as a hitter. We saw that with Colorado, and obviously the elevation plays a big factor into that. But I think Trevor Story will find a way to turn things around. But overall, the Sox have been playing great recently. And I can't wait to see what they do over the summer to get to try and just bolster their spot in the standings. Because right now, it's pretty much them and the Guardians for that final wild card spot. I don't think anyone's going to catch Toronto or Tampa. Basically, you're going to get 4 teams maybe from the AL East make the playoffs, which is going to be very, very surprising. So we'll see what happens with the Sox. I mean, they got the Cardinals coming in town now, the Central Division leading Cardinals, I will say. So this is going to be a really, really important task for the Red Sox as they head closer and closer to that All-Star break. But then finally for this segment, I had mentioned Bruce Cassidy. He got fired from the Bruins, now hired by the Golden Knights. I just wanted to mention that real quick. Don Sweeney is going for the easy way out. I'm not saying that Bruce Cassidy should not have been fired. I would have given him maybe a 55% chance to stay, but there was just something in the air that didn't feel right when you got closer and closer to the playoffs. And then overall in that series with Carolina, something didn't just feel right. And I thought there some kind of change was needed. I'm not saying this is a full-fledged rebuild, but, if Cassidy wasn't the answer, then he wasn't the answer. And, maybe we'll hear that he had some unsettling things with DeBrusk, which is why, DeBrusk requested his trade. Maybe there was some disconnect with him and Bergeron. Maybe that's why Bergeron comes back or something like that. I don't know. But in terms of who should be the head coach now, I think I should be set on Barry Trotz. He's the most accomplished head coach that's still out there on the market. I think Barry Trotz would be a great fit for the Bruins, and he would amplify playing in Boston more than anything. And I think that's what not only them, but the Celtics and the Red Sox, and I'll even throw the Patriots out there, even though we didn't disclose them. They've got to learn what it means to play in the city of Boston. Lastly, as we always do to end our show, it's our LOL moment of the week, and we're going back to the NBA Finals, but something that might be a sour note if you're a Golden State fan. So this week's LOL moment of the week goes to the fake Klay Thompson. I don't know his exact name, but what happens to the number one super fan? You know, I say that loosely because I don't know anything about the Warriors fan base if they have a super fan, but the fake Klay Thompson is now banned from everything relating to the Golden State Warriors. How does he do this? Well, he uses his fake Klay Thompson persona to get into Chase Center in San Francisco before Game 5. He's getting up shots until security says, you know what, you're not Klay Thompson. It's time for you to go. And he gets a ban. He gets banned from everything that has to do with Golden State. That includes Warriors games at the Chase Center, the G League team, any, I think like charity events or something like that. I forget what it was. But I mean, I get that it's a standard, obviously in NBA. If you intrude on the court, you know, if you get on the court without permission, then you get a ban or something like that. I get that. We see that, you know, with fans running on the field or courts in arenas and stadiums, just like that all the time. We see that all the time, that they get banned, they get arrested, you know, stuff like that. I get it. But it was kind of like a loose sort of thing. I don't know. I don't think he was intentionally trying to be like a jerk or anything like that. You know, I do think this was sort of like a PR to try and get some views for like his YouTube channel or his social media accounts or something like that. I mean, if it was me, I think, you know, there was no ill intent. There was no, you know, fear of physical harm. He wasn't going to, you know, attack anybody or something like that. You know, I don't think that was the case, but I get it why you ban the guy, because he went onto the, you know, field of play unauthorized. I get that. But again, this is sort of like a lighthearted thing. It's not like, you know, you had a streaker on the field, or you had a guy who was going after an athlete or something like that. I don't think that was the case. But I mean, Klay Thompson, the fake Klay Thompson, I should say, you know, you want to be the super fan, you want to support the Golden State Warriors. You are going to support their championship now, but you got to do it from home. Everything that doesn't have to do with Golden State, San Francisco, Oakland, whatever, anything Warriors, you are no longer invited to be a part of that. So by doing that, getting onto the court and getting yourself banned for life from anything relating to the Golden State Warriors, you have landed yourself into this week's LOL moment of the week. So that wraps it up for this edition of Let Me Speak. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in wherever you are getting this podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube or listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure, as always, you follow our Twitter pages, our Facebook page, and our Instagram page. All you got to do is search Let Me Speak Podcast. And remember, as always, if you got a point you got to get across, just let the whole world know. Shut up and let me speak.